The security breach at Woodlands Checkpoint last month is unacceptable and a serious error of judgment on the part of the ground officers. Deputy Prime Minister and Home Affairs Minister Teo Hean said this in Parliament today. He adds that the officers involved will be disciplined and corrective actions are also being implemented. Imelda Saad reports.
This is one of the world's busiest checkpoints. 300,000 people and 130,000 vehicles pass through it each day. It's one of two land checkpoints that border Singapore and its northern neighbour, Malaysia. On January 17th at about 2 p.m, a woman arrived at the Woodlands Checkpoint in a Malaysian-registered car. She went past immigration by tailgating the car in front of her. The officer in charge did not sound an alarm until 2.5 minutes later. The woman then cruised through the secondary check area. An auxiliary police officer there also did not sound the alarm.
As a result of it not being classified as a major security breach, the police did not put out a high-level and persistent alert to all ground forces, and therefore they were not looking for the vehicle and driver as actively and vigorously as they should have.
The woman was finally arrested 3 days later, but not before she passed through the police cantonment complex and finally intruding into the Foreign Affairs Ministry.
The security breach at Woodlands Checkpoint on the 17th of January 2014 and the subsequent actions taken until her arrest on 20th January 2014 are not acceptable. Lapses can fall into two categories. The first is when there's some negligence on the part of one or more ground officers in carrying out their tasks. The second and more serious situation is when there has been a serious error of judgment, and this occurred in the current case.
Now, in the past 3 years, there have been 26 cases of attempted or inadvertent evasion of immigration checks at the Woodlands Checkpoint. Now, all but one case was stopped with the prompt activation of the alarm. And in that one particular case, the driver was detained within 2 hours and has since been prosecuted. Mr. Teo said authorities will review existing SOPs to improve their coordination and responses. Among the measures, stepping up on joint drills and border security exercises, leveraging technology and enhancing infrastructure as well as manpower resources. Mr. Teo said the ground commanders have been redeployed to non-operational posts pending disciplinary action. Their supervising officers too will be subject to appropriate discipline, along with other officers involved in the incident.
The woman at the centre of the incident has since been identified as Malaysian teacher Nurul Rohana Ishak. But it wasn't who she was, but rather how she managed to slip through several layers of checks that bothered several members of the House.
Well, why did both officers, the first two officers, allow the car to go through without raising an alarm?
Is it because to classify it as a major security breach would entail a lot more consequences for the officers responsible? So is this a question of officers trying to downgrade the seriousness of the breach?
Does this mean that the particulars of the driver and the vehicle were then not circulated to all the other ground forces? And is that the reason why at cantonment and then at MFA, the officers failed to respond immediately or recognize immediately that this was a vehicle involved in the breach 3 days earlier?
The mistake in classifying the incident was a major factor in the subsequent inadequate response. It's not that I have misclassified it as an error of judgment. That's what the officers did on the ground. They made an error, they breached, that was the judgment they made. It was wrong, and not only that, they breached the protocol. Therefore, it's a serious error on their part. I have had a thorough discussion with the commissioners of ICA and police and their senior leadership. They acknowledge and apologize for the shortcomings and are implementing the remedial measures.